Yeah, we're here to talk about the new eSkimming requirements in PCI DSS 4.0.1, specifically 643 and 1161, which are designed to help prevent fraudulent transactions, the theft of PII, and just generally bad things from happening to your brand as well as to the consumers that interface with you in your online channels. As of the time of this session, there are technically 52 days left, 52 days as of today left for you to have these controls required under 643 and 11.6.1 in place in order to maintain and demonstrate compliance. I'll talk a little bit about some nuances, related to that timetable, as we go through the deck. But one thing I do want you to understand, and it's sort of here in the title, is this does not have to be a difficult exercise for you and for your organization. This does not have to be something stressful. This does not have to be, your typical enterprise security kind of, project. We can get this thing done for you inside 30 days, up and running, virtually pain-free, and virtually pain-free in the ongoing management of these controls. And I'll talk about that as we go along. But I introduced myself earlier, but I'll say again, I'm Steve Ward. I'm with Source Defense. Wanted to give you a quick little background on who we are as an organization. We really are focused solely on protecting data at the point of capture. You think about our focus in PCI, we've had data in transit, data at rest. With the way that things have evolved in the world and the way our adversaries are going after us, protecting data at the point of capture is critical. So this is a web security kind of approach, or falls in the confines of web security. Really is an enablement when you think about what are the sort of the attack surfaces and what the protection of that attack surface looks like. It enables your organization to evolve and do more things in your online channels, and I'll talk about that. Might want to think about this in the confines of third-party risk management. This is a third-party supply chain issue that makes eSkimming possible, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And if you're in the game and you're thinking about zero trust and you're thinking about SBOM, we're supportive, of all of those sort of concepts and even that specific SBOM, requirement as it relates to, the web app environment. We look at the world and we say we're addressing data security, data privacy, and compliance. I'll talk about security and compliance and a little bit of a touch on the data privacy concerns that you should be having, just to kind of educate you a little bit around that. We are a PCI certified TPSP, third-party service provider, and we've done a recent SAC-D with an AOC from IBM. So try and put as many acronyms as we can in a string there for you. But you should also know that we touch on GDPR, HIPAA, FFIEC, and other data privacy or data protection mandates outside of just this PCI use case. So I know there's some on this call, that are merchants in PCI land, but maybe healthcare providers, and HIPAA is in scope for you, or you might be, likely doing business internationally, and so you've got GDPR concerns, or you may be a bank and you're considered a merchant under PCI, but then you have broader concerns as it relates to FFIEC. So I want to touch a little bit on, just the fact that this is a two birds, one stone kind of proposition. And that's something you should be looking at in terms of the overall value of focusing on this problem. We are a PCI PPO, which means we are a principal participating organization. We are incredibly active inside this community. We've spent the better part of the last 4 years. We were an APO, we're a PPO now. We've been educating QSAs and the QSACs, the overarching firms, and working and collaborating with them for the last couple of years. Virtually every QSA firm that you might work with, knows us. So, you can talk to them, about their thoughts on us. We have been a participant in the Small Merchant Task Force and in the E-commerce Guidance Task Force, which I will touch on, in this discussion as well, because I know there's a little bit of misinformation and confusion around what might be coming out of that effort. And I know there are some people that are sort of waiting for, I would sort of use the analogy of sort of the Temple Mount, stones coming down from the Temple Mount. And I'll address a little bit of the misinformation there as we go along. But I bring that up to say we're a part of this community. We've been at every single, community meeting around the world for the last couple of years. You might have seen me on stage with Verizon at the PCI North America in Boston. You're our people. We are, solely built to try and solve the problem. And we believe in supporting the community. And so we've developed a lot of free tools to support your journey. Scoping support, and I'll actually touch on some scoping changes that have happened in the last week or so as we talk here. A lot of guidance on build versus procure. I think against the time frame that you folks are looking at, even if you had more time, there's some guidance in the DSS around building your own CSP SRI. I'll touch on others' thoughts around that. You should probably avoid it if you really want to truly get to the heart of the issue and you want to get it done fast. We do team education and ask me anything sessions. If you have, and we see this all the time, a committee of people that need to be involved in the discussion around how you address this particular requirement, we're happy to come in. No strings attached, educate you, tell you everything we know, talk to you about all the answers to all the questions that you might have. Avail yourselves of that. We're happy to do that for you. We have tools for pre-project website assessment as well. You can start today with a freeware solution. It's kind of time bound, but that can get you moving. And I have a colleague, Scott, on the call with me. He'll be throwing some links up in the chat, as we go along. That'll be one of them. We're happy, as I mentioned, we know a lot of QSAs. We're happy to talk with your QSAs, sit down with them, go through group working sessions, figure things out. And then we've got this rapid action plan that I'll discuss today that can get you up and down on this problem inside the next 30 days, well in time for the deadline. A little bit of background on the focus on eSkimming. Why is it important? I am a security purist. Compliance, I think, is an offshoot of security. I know that in the mindset, a lot of times we say, well, we need to do this and we need to do this, because of a compliance requirement. But I think it's more important to understand the underlying problem because it helps you really understand and educate your firm as to the true risk that you face. Okay. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And hang on, I just want to check and make sure that audio is coming okay. Okay, cool. That's just Scott dropping stuff in the link. All right. From transit and rest to the point of input. I mentioned that term at the top of the call, right? What is this? Why do we need to have this focus? Well, if you look at the timeline over the course of the last, I can't believe to say it, 20 years, really maybe just the last 10, if you want to consider the full shift to EMV, there's been a change in the way business is conducted, the way our consumers buy from us, and in the way that our adversaries target us. We did a great job protecting data in transit and data at rest. When we moved to this EMV liability shift, the adversary recognized that it was going to be a lot harder to conduct card present fraud. And so what they do, they said, well, we'll just move to this new world, card not present, and move into this new environment, always on internet and the rise of e-commerce. And we'll just go after stealing data at the point of input directly as it's being entered into the payment forms that drive your checkout process. And so almost, on like a dime, after the full shift happened, you saw the dawn of what's called Mage Cart, right? And under the DSS, it's referred to as eSkimming. You might hear it as clickjacking or form jacking. They're all synonymous with the same type of attack. Basically, an adversary, uses the forms on your site to skim data and steal either PII, credit card data, conduct fraud, et cetera. The Auto Mage Card happened in about 2016. Within a couple of years, you saw some really, really high-profile attacks that had been going on for a couple of years, flying low and slow. They weren't detected. Not a lot of the attunement and detection capability in place. A couple of high-profile attacks that really rocked the world a little bit. Major airlines, actually my favorite airline, major ticketing company. It was really, I think the moment that a lot of people in the early phases of this problem, rushed into action. One thing to note, and I will talk a little bit more about this as I promised, but this actually was the first time you saw an attack that was, against card data result and jump over the transom into a GDPR problem. Major fine against the airline in 2019. And then, things kind of quieted down, right? At the same time as they were heating up. So in 2020, right, what did we have? We had the world collapse and we had all the oxygen get sucked out of the room on the Mage Cart or the eSkimming conversation. At the same time that we saw the attraction factor for the adversary really heat up. So, we had to deal with the collapsing perimeter. We had to deal with the introduction of third-party supply chain attacks like Cassia and SolarWinds. We saw the rise of ransomware. These were the things that dominated the headlines. But the other thing that was dominating the headline was this exponential shift driven by the global pandemic, pushing e-commerce forward at a growth rate that exceeded all previous expectations, and really changing the way that users or consumers interact with brands. Right? I'd say the vast majority of consumers are definitely in your online channel, probably transacting through the online channel, if not just browsing there. But huge shift, and the bad guys are like, well, this is fantastic. We got more people coming online than ever. The news cycle is not dominating, our type of attacks. It's focused on other things. Security teams are, scrambling to deal with all these pressures, and we're just going to rock and roll, and we're going to take, something in the order of like 200 million, credit cards, based on the recorded future report that just came out about, I don't know, a week or two ago, in this slow and low capacity. And so, a couple of years go by, and I think the problem becomes pronounced enough at the card associations that PCI DSS 4.0 is introed. Okay, and that's where 643 and 11.6.1 come into place. That's where the requirements to combat this e-skimming first pop up. Now these are future dated requirements, and that's why we're on this call today talking about 52 days from now. If you really want to look at it, it's been about 600, and I don't have the exact number, but it's been hundreds and hundreds of days. It's been 2 years since we were telegraphed. These are going to be future data controls that need to be in place by March 31st, 2025. All the while, just because we were given time to move to comply doesn't mean that we shouldn't have been moving to secure. Okay. The problem exists. It's there. It's there every day. And every day you wait is a day that, you run the risk of, being one of these victims, and of doing, potentially irreparable harm to the organization. So it's interesting. I mentioned, being with Verizon on the PCI North America stage. We have been doing some empirical research in terms of, the attack surface, which I'm going to get into what that is here in a second. And we're seeing a 2x increase in 2024, and even more now, with the use of the third-party supply chain that is helping drive these attacks. So what is that? How does that work? And why is this thing in 643 and 11.6.1 calling on script management and managing what's going on the site? The attack surface is basically driven through JavaScript. Okay, JavaScript is basically how the vast majority of the websites in the world are compiled. JavaScript has no native controls. It's kind of everything, everywhere, all at once. It can perform any action and behave in any way it wants on the site, which is like 97% of all websites in the world. And so JavaScript is basically the attack surface through which the Mage Cart actors or the e-skimming actors and such are attacking your consumers and your brand. It's because the fact of the matter is that 82% of the code running on your site, 80% of this JavaScript running on the site, is coming from outside sources, and you don't have visibility into the security chain that they follow, or into whether or not a compromise occurs with one of those sources. So this is a third-party supply chain issue. You might be running analytics tools, or you're running chatbots, or you're running social plugins. Whatever it is, these are all things that your teams have decided are important for the user experience, the consumer experience, but they introduce tremendous security concerns because it's all script that you're basically allowing to run with 100% trust, not zero trust, and you're allowing to run it in tens of millions, hundreds of millions, whatever your consumer base looks like of transactions, on a weekly, monthly, daily basis. The problem is that when a bad guy compromises JavaScript, they can do a lot of really, really nefarious things with it. And in fact, one of the real problems when it gets to the data privacy conversation is that many of these things are inherently built in in a benign fashion by design of these scripts. And so what I mean by that is when we look at what an adversary can do, changing page content, recording keystrokes and capturing and exfiltrating data, adding content, images, text, video, form fields, tracking behaviors, redirecting visitors to other URLs, other sites, right? These are all things that your third-party services, the supply chain, which is, basically the attack surface, can and do on a daily basis. And so it's important to look at this and say, it's a concern. The bad guys can conduct this type of behavior. It's a concern. The good guys are actually conducting this behavior in the first place. That lowers the barrier of entry for the bad guy to get in and into this game, so much so that we see exploit kits in the multiple hundreds of dollars at this point in time. And B, if you do have those broader data privacy concerns like GDPR, like HIPAA, there are many, many instances where the benign nature of the third-party service puts you in hot water. Lawsuits related to HIPAA overreach, things of that nature are abounding. And so when you think about this and you go make the case internal to the organization, you say, we got to do this because it's compliance. You say, well, it's actually about security. It's about PCI compliance, but it actually helps make sure we retain other forms of compliance by putting controls over top of these third parties, right? Which we do to prevent attacks, but also do in a general way to change the behaviors or modify the behaviors and limit access to what these scripts are able to do when they're running on your sites. Okay. The council, the card associations, the brands, they've all recognized this problem. Visa continues to chime in on it, but I use this older quote. I mean, you'll see it in every one of their biannual reports, since. All the other brands are chiming in on it as well. We heard it at PCI Boston. One brand told us this is the vast majority of the fraud they're confronting right now. But the council took action. The card associations are warning you the targeting of these platforms and these third-party code integrations, this supply chain is happening. This is where the bad guys are focused. This is what you should be focused on preventing. When the council took action, they said, okay, look, you need to now have a way to make sure that the scripts running on your site are supposed to be running on your site, that they're authorized, that there isn't, something that's been added, or that there aren't legacy scripts that, old teams forgot to remove from the site, scripts that might even be, out of management, where the domains might even be under control of attacker. You got to confirm that these scripts are supposed to be there. So you got to inventory them, right? Got to confirm that they're supposed to be there. Then you got to make sure the integrity of the script is assured, okay? And then you need to monitor payment headers, and then you need to alert and take action against those alerts. And so we say alert and block all malicious scripts on your payment pages. So you got to do something. They've given a nice prescription for what to do under the DSS. This is that third-party leakage concern that I just already addressed. They do a nice job of talking what's going on in the DSS, but they've made some changes that I'll talk about, today, and give you some insights on that I think, shouldn't give you pause to be focused on the problem, but may, have some change, and that you need to talk with your QSA about in terms of how you scope out your compliance documentation around the problem. I want to just point out, this is some data that we did bring. This is from the Verizon PSR. I just touch it real quick. I just want to say this is everybody's problem. So, I mentioned 97% of the world's websites are running JavaScript. 82% of the world's websites that we've analyzed, the code is coming from third parties. Everybody's using third-party services. There is not really a way to run a modern web experience without these partners engaged. And so you have a real business need. And so regardless of geography or industry, everybody's doing this. We took a look for the Verizon PSR at 7,000 of the world's largest websites, North America, Europe, Latin America. And we found 130,000 scripts across that landscape. This is third-party scripts, and that would be services that you engage with. Like, I'm going to put Metapixel on my site, and fourth party and nth party scripts. And the fourth and nth party are scripts or partners that your partners call onto that complicate the supply chain security concern, right? Because I might be Meta, but I might call in, an ad system, or that ad system might call on something else downstream. And so if compromises happen anywhere in that link chain, they could impact, the security of your site and impact consumer data. You might look at it because a lot of us have spent a lot of time about, focused on isolation, and descoping against PCI in the card present or the brick and mortar sort of environment, and sort of just saying, okay, well, we'll isolate environments down and we'll segregate networks and things of that nature. You might think, well, nobody should be running scripts on payment pages, right? We found 40% of the scripts that we saw are running in that sensitive area. And, as I mentioned above, when we talk about like what scripts are able to do, it really doesn't matter, in our opinion, if they're on the payment page or not. They still represent an area of concern for security, and still represent for sure an area of concern related to data privacy. We see an average of about 18 scripts per page. That's increased about 50% in the past 2 years. And we see, as I mentioned, risky actions happening just in a benign fashion. There are scripts that are accessing PII. There are scripts that are accessing card data. There are scripts that are reading credentials. There's a business use and a business case for it, but they're doing things that just make it, they're in line on the sensitive data. That it creates some data privacy concern, but also makes it really, as I said, easy for an adversary to compromise and just use the code that's already been written and just redirect the behavior or the output, to domains under their control. Talking fast on this one because I did promise I'll try and get you out here in the next 20 minutes. I do want to just tell you that we saw a direct correlation, and I know people like benchmarking, so I wanted to bring this up. A direct correlation to script utilization in higher, more highly customizable product offering environments. It seems that the apparel and fashion industry is huge on third-party script utilization, technology, food and beverage. These are all, A, heavily online or strong online presence, B, highly customizable products that require, recommendations, and, that the site, be dynamic, and that it, be able to respond and react and even predict, user behavior, that in the apparel example, you want to buy that hat. Well, these shoes go great with it. And also that if you have a lower initial customer conversion rate, we found more utilization of these scripts as well. So if it's a higher ticket item or people do a lot of electronic window shopping, you're going to find the website generally has more things involved, like with social and, with retargeting and following people, from your website into, the social environments that they go. So there's a new gap to fill. There are requirements that have put out there. The relevant requirements are for payment pages. Again, I mentioned maintain a script, confirm, blah, blah, blah. I want to get into something that just got kicked up, big time into the discussion pool a week ago, which is a change to SAC-A eligibility criteria. And so I don't know how many on the call might be SAC-A eligible merchants or if you've gone down that pathway, but you need to be aware of this. And so I wanted to make sure I addressed it in this discussion. When you look at the DSS and you look at the requirements for 643 and 11.6.1, until a week ago, they applied virtually to every merchant that exists. Okay. And it was sort of unequivocal. You had to do 643, 11.6.1. The PCI Council has made an update to SAC-A eligibility criteria, sort of at their own whim and not really listening to a lot of feedback from the QSA community, or we as vendors, or even from those in the PSP space. They moved forward with this, and so it's kicked up some dust. And it may be on your radar, it may not be. So either way, I'll bring it up. What was going on? January 30th announcement changed SAC-A eligibility criteria. It's effective April 1st. So the current SAC-A runs until April 1st. Okay, but the new SAC-A kicks in. It changes scope. Okay, but only changes scope for SAC-A eligibility criteria. Okay, it was announced to this guidance task force that we're on, but it wasn't a product of that effort. I want to be clear on this one. I mentioned at the top, I'm on the EGTF, the e-commerce guidance task force. So are 70 or 80 other people. We were impaneled to provide a guidance document around 643 and 11.6.1. That document will come out in March. It is not going to be some earth-shattering change to the DSS. That is not what's happening with that. It's meant to be, think of it like a Q&A or an FAQ or like a guidance document, how to implement, right? It is not changing the standard. And I know I've heard from other people, well, we're going to wait, or like, oh, well, the SAC-A eligibility criteria came out and, they're going to provide clarification in this document in the next, 60 days. Not happening. I'm telling you right now, I've got the draft of it sitting in my inbox, And, we're not returning our comments back until early next week. They're trying to get it out in early March. Do not wait thinking that the standard is going to change. They're going to change, nothing's going to happen in that regard. I promise you. But anyway, they did change this SAC-A and the eligibility criteria. Basically, what they said is they're removing 643 and 11.6.1 and the requirement under 12.3.1 for a targeted risk analysis from the SAC-A. However, this is a very, very big however, they added eligibility criteria under the SAC-A, which says that merchants must confirm their site is not susceptible to attacks from scripts that could affect the merchant's e-commerce environment. So effectively, the stroke of genius was done in an effort to try and support the level 4 community, the real small mom and pop merchants, to minimize the requirements for inventory, for justification, for header scans, et cetera. The idea was, the small merchant won't have the technical prowess, to address these problems. And what they, I think failed to understand is there's a lot probably on this call, of larger merchants who have used, FAQ 1331 and, like pointed back to SAC-A and it basically scoped out their e-com environment around SAC-A. So it's a bigger change than they thought. And it impacts more merchants than they originally thought. But I think what's really, really key is the takeaway. And I've had, I'd say, 40 conversations with QSAs in the last week and a half. The real key, the real takeaway is it does not let you off the hook if you're a SAC-A merchant from having to protect against the e-skimming threat. It just diminishes the requirements under 643 and 11.6.1. Okay, what it says is you don't have to have those elements to be be compliant if you're a SAC-A eligible merchant, right? For all other merchant types, SAC-A, EP, SAC-D, you go ROC, whatever, 643, 11.6.1, they rule the land. Okay. And that's not going to change. So for those of you on this call, that do a ROC with a QSA, or any other form that's not SAC-A, this is still required. But if you are SAC-A and you still want to go down that pathway, keep in mind, the new language does not de-emphasize the need to secure against e-skimming. It just moves the goalpost and emphasizing the point that if you're a SAC-A, there's new criteria that actually might increase scope. If you're any other form of merchant, you're not getting off the hook from 643 and 11.6.1. The new stuff under the SAC-A basically says all elements of the payment pages basically have to come from your third-party service provider or your payment processor. And you have confirmed that your site is not susceptible to attacks from scripts that could affect the e-commerce environment. The DSS 643.11.6.1 that deals with payment pages. Under the SAC-A eligibility, they've now changed it to deal with site. And so, it may no longer be advantageous for you if you had been a SAC-A to stay on that. Now, any questions on that? I'm happy to answer. This is new news. You guys might not even heard it. I don't know how close you guys are following, sort of the echo chamber of everything that goes on in the PCI, community. Happy to answer questions on any of that. Just ask them, and I'll give you everything I know. Now, more broadly, when we talk about scoping and what should be focused on, we would really emphasize a need to protect the entire site. Okay. When you look at this way of sort of misconception that we think exists there, I fully redirect my checkout page to my e-commerce provider, so I should be good. And that actually falls under the new SAC-A definition, that first bullet I just read to you. I don't think you're good. I think that it's a false sense of security. I think if you're concerned only with protecting, the actual payment form, then you might have somewhat of a case. But again, when I talk about the capabilities of JavaScript when compromised to add and change, the composition of the site, we see this all the time where a bad guy will just put a fake checkout link on your website. And so to the user, I'm still going down that checkout pathway. I click on the link. I'm redirected to what looks like even just a Stripe payment process, and I give my credit card data, and the data's still been stolen. You're still on the hook for it as the merchant, and you've lost the transaction, and you're going to have the brain damage. So we think site is more important than page. My e-commerce provider is going to block all scripts on my payment pages. I'm good. Again, same idea. Just because the scripts are blocked on your payment page doesn't mean somewhere upstream in the site an adversary can't conduct an e-skimming attack. It also overlooks the fact that they can redirect to their own payment page. I fully outsource payments. We should be good. Again, if the website exists and you're running scripts on it, you got a problem. Oh, we only run first-party scripts. So this isn't a problem. You're talking about the supply chain issue. First-party scripts come under attack as well. And the DSS actually requires not just third-party scripts for management and inventory and justification and all that, but your first-party scripts as well. Okay, so first-party scripts are definitely in scope. So we did some work with Coalfire. They took a look at it. I just went through these slides. I'm going to skip ahead. There's what am I looking for? White paper that Scott will put into the chat for us here. That speaks to their view on enhanced scope, but effectively they're reiterating what I just said. The entire payment flow is what needs protecting, or the site is what needs protecting. Not just a singular page where you think that might be the full risk. That's not the full risk. So see risk, with clear eyes. Build versus procure. There are mentions of SRI and CSP as potential controls under the DSS. Managing both of those is an incredibly hard undertaking. It requires a lot of complex overhead, a lot of management, a lot of ongoing management. But ultimately, the real concern should be that it doesn't stop the attacks. Okay. CSP is basically a binary on-off whitelist. And so when you look at the real nature of, the world today, you cannot whitelist every service, because the services are dynamic and they change very, very rapidly. There's no way to sort of like vet out, and sort of say, well, we did, we know these to be fully legitimate. The other thing is, if you have something in your content security policy which is allowable, it's allowed regardless of whether or not the script has been compromised. Let script run. Let script run equals no solution to the problem, right? What you need is to find a way to control the behaviors of scripts. Viking Cloud white paper, they chime in on the CSP problem. In the EGTF document, which will be coming out, there will be other thoughts from the community around CSP and SRI. Again, if you're looking to make a move on this fast, going into the build situation is just an untenable solution in the first place. But I know many organizations, it's our policy. We have to look at build first. We can help you. There's voices that can help you. There's guidance documents that can help you to kind of like maybe cut that off at the pass, so that you don't get mired down into a project that's going to be inordinately expensive and ultimately won't take the threat off the table. I have the little QR code thingy in here, but I think Scott had put the Viking Cloud white paper in the chat. Okay. So I'm running low on the time that I wanted to talk about. So now I'll give you a little quick primer on what we do at Source Defense and how we can get you moving inside 30 days. So we have two solutions. We have a detection solution and we have a protection solution. The detection solution, there's absolutely no deployment necessary. We basically are conducting outside scans of your web properties. We're inventorying all the scripts. We're cataloging sensitive data. We're giving you alerts on incidents. You've got to then take that and you've got to build that into your security operation, and you've got to respond, right? And so, detection is a good, fast way to get going, but it's going to require a lot more overhead and a lot more management, on the part of your teams. Okay. Our protection solution is basically deployed. It's super, super lightweight. It's a few lines of code. We're effectively the JavaScript that runs all JavaScript. We sandbox all the third-party services that are running on your site. And what we do is we control their behaviors. So it's a behavioral-based approach to prevention. We allow and disallow, access, from these third-party scripts to whatever we determine and you determine is allowable and disallowable. So, we limit the access of what these third parties can do. And then if an attempted attack occurs, it's in a sandbox and it's controlled in that sort of disposable environment so that it cannot, jump the transom into the actual transaction. We don't break the site in the process. The services are still running, but they're running with a controlled behavior applied on top of them, and with Source Defense protection first kind of approach. There's no alerts for you to monitor and respond to. Data leakage that I talked about is thwarted automatically, and these e-skimming and mage card attacks go away. And clients can get this up and running. We've done it in as quick as 24 hours, and get it up and running inside your time frame. If you started today, the 52 days would only be, the clock would only tick against the time it takes for your teams to go through procurement process and legal and all that kind of stuff. On our end of things, we make it super easy. We can deploy with a snap of a finger. We can have you up and running, and we can demonstrate compliance as early as like a week from now, or even faster if you were ready to move. So you do definitely still have time if you're trying to hit the March 31st, 2025 window, if you work with a solution like us where we can get it deployed and pushed out so rapidly. The one thing I would say is there may be folks on this call who are saying, well, okay, my rock comes up in November. March 31st is going to come and go. We're not worried about it until we have to get in and demonstrate compliance. What I would say to you is this. The guidance from every QSA that I've spoken to, the guidance from the council is don't wait. The deadline is the deadline. I think there's going to be some pretty stringent enforcement on the brand and the merchant acquirer end of things, because of the fact that these are future data controls. That said, if this does slip, don't let it linger. Okay. Get it done and out of the way fast. So start your project now, even if you got some months that you're gonna go blow past the deadline. One of the things that we've heard very, very consistently from the QSA community is when they come in there to do your audit, and when they come in there to complete that rock or even that AOC with you, they're going to want to see that these controls were in place, and not in place the night before they came in, but in place working and with a demonstrated track record of logs. So it behooves you to get moving. It behooves you to get moving fast. If you do miss the deadline, don't wait 6 months. Again, the threat exists regardless of the compliance requirement as well. Okay. So I touched on a handful of these things up there. I don't think we need to go too much in that. I just want to talk to you about sort of like what the 30-day program would look like. I mean, and it's this easy. So, discovery is day one. All right. The good news is you're right here at, maybe day zero in your approach, or maybe you're a lot further along. Hopefully you are. But, if you don't know what's running on your site, if you don't know what scripts are there, if you have no visibility, if you've never even, had a conversation, day one would be, let's get you a quick assessment done. And we can make that happen, by Monday. You submit a form for us now, tell us you want it, and we'll get our teams working on it. And we'll have a meeting next week to walk you through basically what our platform would show you. It'll be an outside looking in scan, and we will show you, all the services you have running, the third parties, the fourth parties, et cetera. And then we can get into a dialogue around what you need to do, to get moving, to evaluate us. That generally is just a couple of days. There's not a lot to test here. Mostly it's around whether or not your teams are concerned around performance degradation on the site. We've been through that game a million times. We support 1,000 of the world's largest brands. We can definitely answer that, with a positive 2 thumbs up. We're not going to impact the site. So it's usually a very, very rapid eval period. And then let's just get an acquisition. We have put together a really simple contract that should be able to get through very easily. The pricing on this thing is drop in the bucket in comparison to either what you would have to do from a build perspective, or to put FTEs, full-time employees, on top of something like this, and definitely pales in comparison to any fines and judgments. It's going to be an easy process. We're going to get it up and done, and we're going to get you, this taken care of. And as I mentioned, we have built our solution to be super simple, to be super lightweight, and to be super management free. We've even constructed a dashboard for you completely designed to PCI, which makes it for like super easy ongoing management and click button reporting to demonstrate, that these controls are in place when it does come down to any of the supporting documentation that you need. So, if you want to start now, we can get you done before March 31st. But don't delay any further. Don't wait for this. As I mentioned, don't wait for some, massive revelation to come down the mountain, in what will be probably about a month on this EGTF document. It's not going to happen. Just get moving and just take the threat off the table, right? I mean, that's my big advocacy, on the soapbox end of things. So, I promise we're trying to end this about 2:45. So if there's any questions, I know Scott's been throwing stuff in the window for us as I've been asking. Okay, all right. What's my reaction to the PCI blog announcement? Yeah, that may have come in. Yeah, that probably came in right before I went through the whole SAC discussion, because that is related to the SAC. If I wasn't clear on any of that, just drop me a note back, and I'll let you know, or we can expand on it. You can also reach out to me directly. I have been, as I mentioned, having calls with dozens of QSAs, dozens of merchants. I'm Steve at sourcedefense.com. It's just Steve at sourcedefense.com. And I'd happily engage. Oh, Scott already beat me to it. Happily engage in a dialogue with you on it. But I think again, our position is it's some dust that's unnecessarily been kicked up into the atmosphere, but basically doesn't change much. Plug forward, solve the problem, and get this off the table. Okay. Any other questions that anybody has here? Feel free to drop them in either one of the windows. And I'll take a sip of water while we wait to see if anybody's got anything. Okay. Feel like we should have Jeopardy music every time I get to this point. Not seeing anything come through. So either you guys are taking it all in, we answered what you were looking for, or we just basically were your background music for the Friday afternoon, push into the weekend. Whatever the case, thank you for joining us. Again, Steve Ward's my name. You'll see me around in the community and all that. And we're here to help. I know, hey, oh, you guys are a vendor or whatever, you're pushing we're here to help. And I think everybody that we've worked with would attest to that. So happy to give you my time to educate, get things answered, whatever it may be, if you need it. Don't be shy. And yeah, we've got tools that can get this moving fast. So, drop in, talk to us. Let's go. Let's engage. Let's get this done. And you got bigger fish to fry in terms of the overall management of things. This is going to be super easy and you're going to be glad you did it. So thank you for your time. I hope we do get some follow up. And if not, keep fighting the good fight. And if not working with us, go out there and solve the problem. But let's be problem oriented and problem focused, and let's get this stuff off the table. No reason for it. Okay, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you, and you have a nice weekend.